Hey you, Nina here. You are officially listening to Triggered. Can we play with that wherever you get your podcasts? If you're not following me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina, now is the time to do it, my friend. Lots of good stuff on there. We're really focusing on anti-supremacy beliefs this week. And of course, it is June. We are celebrating Pride, something you can do every day of the year, but particularly get hyped about it in June. Yes, yes. Now, what is this episode going to be about? I will tell you. We're going to be exploring the concept of bubble hopping. And if you are not familiar with this and you like to challenge yourself to grow, you like to challenge potential biases or prejudices that might be within you, this might be the episode for you. Okay. So lots of triggers, right? Around biases, right? Every trigger you ever have, in fact, is going to be tied to some part of your identity or role, right? But an identity. And there are lots of biases around how identities should, quote unquote, show up in the world. So this episode, we're going to be using Max Hawkins' idea of bubble hopping in order to challenge our biases. Yes, yes. We are going to be playing with things, but y'all know it's short and sweet. We can't play with everything. So at least one facet is what we're going to explore. And I want to invite you to grab a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with, right? For what comes up for you in this episode. We need to have the conversations if we want to grow. So for now, you know that I am curious. Are you ready to play?
Welcome to Triggered. Can we play with that? You know that moment when your emotions ramp up in an instant, leaving you feeling helpless, frozen, or out of control? In that moment, you've been emotionally hijacked, the very definition of triggered. And I want to ask you, can we play with that? I'm Nina Garcia, drama therapist and empowerment coach of Houston Creative Arts Therapy. Join me as we discover ways to empower you and the people who mean the most to you, to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. Triggered. Real playful, real respectful, real empowered.
Let's take a breath. All right, story time. So we are leaning into a story. If you are familiar with another podcast called Invisibilia, there is this episode on Invisibilia that I definitely recommend that you listen to after this. If you have not heard it already, it is featuring Max Hawkins, and he talks about bubble hopping. Now, if you're not familiar with this phenomenon of bubble hopping, Max goes into detail about how he was like, my life is too on track, right? Mind you, this is a totally made up voice I'm giving Max, obviously. He was like Batman style. My life is totally on the same track. I need to get it out of here. Too many things are too routine. I need something different, right? He was like, he needed to switch it up. So what he did was he was I'm basically going to hack Facebook. I'm making some of this up. You guys got to go listen to the real episode, right? And he was like, I'm going to jump into a bunch of different groups that I haven't been invited to, and I'm just going to show up, right? And so he shows up to all these different events with all these different groups of people from all different walks of life. Most of which he does admit, he's like, a lot of them, there was nobody there, nobody showed up, or there were a few people there, but some of which, he'll have these lifelong memories about because he, showed up with a bottle of wine or showed up with a gift and to a Christmas party or something to that effect with people he just did not know. And I know a lot of us are cringing, right? We're like, oh, what do you mean? Like, you show up with like strangers? Yes, that is what we mean. And even though this is the story, this is the premise of bubble hopping, this idea of getting out of your bubble and jumping into someone else's, right? Therapeutically, I'm looking at this, just so we're clear, as, it's increasing your flexibility, your range of ability to enjoy the world, to experience the world, and to feel safe experiencing the world, right? So Max did this episode again on bubble hopping, but I got to thinking after I heard this episode, what if there was more to bubble hopping? Now, this was a few years ago when I first heard this episode, and it inspired me. It just set off a spark. And I was like, what is it that I can play with when it comes to bubble hopping? And let me tell you what it was. I was like, you know what? He's talking about being stuck on a track, right? Like his life being planned out for him. He knew that A plus B was going to equal C, that there was no spontaneity, right? And I thought, how can we take the narrative tracks that we've been taught, the stories that we've been taught to believe about ourselves and about other people and about groups of people, in fact, how can we take story tracks that have been set and that are predictable and use bubble hopping to disrupt those? You picking up what I'm putting down here? Okay, just in case you're not, let me go ahead and like suss this out a little bit more. So we're all conditioned to have all these different stories from, really before the womb, if we could be, but the second we enter this world, we are hearing and bombarded with narratives about how we should exist in the world, who we should be around, what kind of jobs we should have, how do we should, right? There's like all these different narratives just running down about how we should exist in the world. And their tracks, they're predictable. And a lot of people will find a lot of comfort in their track, right? In particular, you will find comfort in your track if it offers you a lot of privilege, okay? If it offers you a lot of privilege, you're going to find a lot of comfort in that track. And of course, that makes sense, right? Who doesn't want a little bit of privilege, okay? So what we're talking about with bubble hopping is what happens if your track does not allow you to have privilege? What happens if the narrative track that you are stuck on, that somebody offered to you, that you were taught, that you were conditioned, right, with growing up, what happens if not only is it not helpful for you, but maybe it also is not helpful for other people? What if it oppresses you? What if it oppresses other people? You picking up what I'm putting down here, folks? I sure hope you are. Because that's what I think of when I think of bubble hopping, and the way that we are talking about with empowerment, empowerment and identity. And how do you own your truth without oppressing yourself and without oppressing someone else? And I think, it's really hard to get out of a narrative. It's really hard to get out of a track unless you're willing to disrupt it. And when you think of bubble hopping, this is like a skill, right? It's a way to practice being courageous enough to say, I am willing to consensually leave my bubble to pop into somebody else's bubble. And then I'm going to come back, right? And maybe my bubble will be extended a little bit more. Maybe I will have a little bit more flexibility as to who I can spend my time with and how I can spend my time. Is this making sense? I hope this is making sense. So if you listened to our last episode, okay, what we talked about in the challenging inherited biases, right? Challenge your biases was everything that episode was about. And now everybody has biases. And just in case you forgot, right, a bias is a prejudice usually for or against something, okay? We all have them. You can't be without it, right? To be human, my friends. But what we talked about in that last episode was the challenge that comes with not owning that your bias is your bias. And instead, what you do is you put it on something or someone or some group outside of you, okay? Now, I know that we know what we're talking about. And in that episode, I said, I had a prejudice against small towns, right? I'm like a big city girl. And I had this genuine embodied fear of small towns. And it came from a bunch of stuff from my past, family narratives. I want you to go back and listen to that episode if you are more interested in hearing on that. But one of the things that I really talked about in that episode was, how do you recognize that that's your discomfort, right? My discomfort, I fear small towns, as opposed to small towns are terrifying, right? That's me putting an idea on small towns, right? It's a blanketed idea. It might have even been considered by me a stereotypical idea of small towns, that small town means small minds, that small town means prejudice, right? Against people of color, right? That small town means fill in the blank, right? These were ideas that I had and that were perpetuating themselves in the decisions that I made around small towns, and the thoughts that I had and the feelings that I had, right? It was like, okay. But what I was doing was I was putting it on the small town instead of owning, I have a discomfort with small towns. I have a fear of small towns. I, right? That really, really important skill of disrupting the projection on something else and really being able to own what is yours when it comes to that dynamic. Okay. So we talked about that in the last episode, and I really wanted you to like own your discomfort on it, right? Let's stop putting it off on, mine was towns, but the reality is we do this with people. We do this with identities. We do this with race. We do this with religion. We do this with skin color, okay, even within a race, quote unquote, right? We do this with gender. We do this with sexual orientation. We do this with everything. And I'm here to say it's not okay. But we've got to own it if we want to change it, right? I mean, I think there's a genuine question in here of how do you change something that you can't see? If I keep putting off my discomfort and my uncomfortable feelings on other people or groups of people, at what point do I ever need to be accountable for the fact that it is my feeling that I feel first that I'm casting on them? Own your truth. Own it. I'm not going to judge you for it, because if it's the truth, it's the truth. And just because something is uncomfortable or inconvenient does not make it any less a truth. Make sense? So I asked you to own it for yourself in the last episode. And here's what I want you to do in this one, okay? If you did not do it in the last episode, now's your chance, okay? I want you to write down a simple sentence to something you have an aversion to, okay? Whatever group of people or type of person or fill in the blank it is, I want you to own it, right? You can do it privately. Own it, take it off of that group, that person, make it yours. And then you're right, you're going to make sure that it is an I statement. I feel this way about this thing, right? I feel this way. I think these things, okay? And because that was last episode, here's how I want you to elevate yourself this week. I want you to take it a step further. And I want you to start thinking about, how do you lean in, right? How do you lean out of your bubble and into the next bubble? If we were to put it on like that 1 to 5 leaning in spectrum, I will have my assistant put the link in the show notes so that you know what I'm talking about as you lean into those, to your edge, to the challenging areas. Yes, yes, yes. What one thing could you do to hop out of your bubble and into that world, even if just for a moment, to try to gain a glimpse of the humanity that is in that group of people, that lies within that identity? Yes. So at this point, you might be like, oh, definitely, Nina. I know what it is that I'm going to be writing down. I know how I'm going to jump out of my bubble and into their bubble and doobity-da, right? Which is fantastic. Excellent. Write it down. Pause this if you need to. But if you are struggling to find something and you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to jump out of my bubble into the next bubble, and I need somebody, Nina, what are you going to do? And they take a breath. Take a breath. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you some options. They're not the only options that are in the world, and they're super simplified, y'all, right? We can't get into a lot in these episodes. They're pretty short. But I really just need you to whet your appetite on this. I want you to get your curiosity honed a little bit more, right? And so here are some examples, okay? One of the examples I have is, yes, you could absolutely say, I'm going to think about that group and I'm going to disrupt the negative thoughts and feelings that come up, right? I'm going to replace them with healthy ones. If that is your jam, just thinking it is enough, then fantastic. Most of us will actually need a little bit more. Yeah, we'll need experiences to help us disrupt that. So if thoughts are your jam, by all means. If not, continue. You can start listening to music by people from that group. Okay, by people from that group. Now, this could get dicey. Be like, oh, I know I don't like beat, right? The music from that. What if you decided that you were going to find at least one song? What if you just started there? What happens if you find 2 songs? What happens if you find 3? Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm leaning in, leaning in, leaning. Let's keep going. You could watch TV shows and documentaries that feature, right, people from this group, right, that feature exploration of this identity piece. It's all about you being able to lean in a comfortable way and lean into that edge, okay? You can go eat with them. Yes, you can go to restaurants that are led by them. You can dance with them. You can go to clubs and businesses and support businesses that are owned by them, right? And if all else fails and you say, no, Nina, I'm like struggling with like level 3 or above supremacy on this issue, and I have no idea how to change it. It's how I was raised, born and bred. I don't know how to change it. And this isn't enough. I'm going to invite you to come see me. It sounds like you need a specialist in working with developing an anti-supremacist self. And that's okay. If I'm not your jam, let's find someone who is. I guarantee there's somebody out there working on it who can help you lean into that edge when it comes to this. Yes? Yes. Okay. So I've given you some examples on how to lean in, how to bubble hop, how to get out of your bubble and get into something else's bubble, right? Expand your horizons, my friends. And of course, these are short and sweet, so we're already nearing the end of the episode. For those of you who enjoy a bit of that self-exploration that I so love for myself and that I so want for you, I'm going to leave you with the thought for the upcoming week. Take a look at the thought that you wrote down, right? I said, hey, write it down, a simple sentence, make it an I statement, okay? If you thought about it, then reach back into your mind and grab it out, okay? We have to know at this point in our journey that if we are trying to be that empowered human self, that this thought, this feeling is not about another group of people. It is about how you feel inside your body. It is your feeling. And I want you to own that without shame. It's there for a reason. But if it is not helping you own your truth without oppressing yourself and without oppressing other people, I want to invite you to flip the script on this, right? You know that that's what I want. That's what an empowered human is doing. They're diversifying the narratives, right? They're getting more comfortable with the mixed stories, the mixed identities that are here because y'all hashtag mixed is America, okay? Get with the story. Mixed is America. Some people ain't hip to the game, but I'm happy to talk about it, yeah? So beyond that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to commit to doing one thing this month, preferably this week, because y'all, it gets away from us, right? It gets away from us. Preferably this week, right? Commit to one thing that's going to allow you to bubble hop when it comes to that particular identity. Okay, that particular group of people, that particular thing that you wrote down that you are still struggling with an aversion to, commit to one thing that is going to help you bubble hop. Yes? Yes. Okay. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this episode, reach out to me on Instagram. Yeah, Drama Therapist Nina. Reach out to me. Let's see what we can make happen. There's lots of conversations happening on the different posts on there. Feel free to comment, right? And see if you get that conversation going. Otherwise, in the next episode, here's what we're talking about. Celebrating pride. Yes. Okay. It is June, right? In the airing of this episode, we're celebrating pride. And by the way, if you are struggling with your own queer identity, or if you are struggling with queer identity outside of yourself, yes, this is internalized oppression versus externalized oppression, folks. This tool still works. Bubble hop your way to owning your truth without oppressing yourself and without oppressing other people. You so deserve that. You so deserve to feel comfortable no matter where you are in the world. So, with that said, that is what we planned for today, folks. Thank you for taking a moment to explore your triggers as a human being. And if this has been helpful and you'd like to support Trigger, Can We Play With That? Please share the episode. Or share another episode, or go listen to another episode. But really, just share this episode with someone who you think is going to benefit from it, okay? Empowered humans, diversifying the narrative, flipping the script. When you share the episode, you're building a bridge. So let's keep building the bridges, yeah? Oh, yeah. Otherwise, stay curious.